Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, the podcast aimed at fostering knowledge and sharing stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour or so, I'm going to be joined by not only a truly brilliant recruiter, but a great friend to me personally. Having known this individual from his very first recruiting job back in 2018, I've witnessed him transform into a go-to specialist in the tech recruitment space. Having worked and grown processes for teams like Codility, TradeByte, and now with Clio. He's the type of individual who goes far beyond what is required of him as a recruiter. He's always actively connecting people together, even if not for his own roles. He's an ear to listen to when you need advice. And he's also someone to reason with through hard decisions. So when you're ready, grab your favorite tea or coffee if you prefer. And join me in welcoming today's guest, the senior tech talent partner, Matthew Noble, with the team at Clio. So thanks so much for joining, Matt. Although it has taken me nearly 2 years to get you onto this podcast.
Good things happen to those who wait, but yeah, really, really excited to be here, mate.
I think the first time I approached you for it, you're thinking, "Oh, what's he doing now?" And you grilled me with questions. I do remember this. I was outside my garden when I asked you, and you grilled me with questions. Now 2 years later, you're probably like, maybe I should do it now. But it is genuinely a pleasure to have you on. And before we get into the topic of what it is, this one, I'm sure people can probably guess from the title. But before we go into it, I do like to start everyone off with the same sort of question, because especially as the years have rolled on, the question has kind of changed, well, the answers have changed and morphed with time. But from your perspective, what do you feel makes a high-performing recruitment team right now?
Good question. I think it's obviously subjective to the needs of the company, but I think we live in a world now where we have so many metrics that we set, especially in recruitment, and ultimately the goal is to bring people in. I see high performance as a team that is not just operational in filling roles and getting people into companies, but also being strategic in thinking about new ways that we can move forward in recruitment, and also just bettering recruiting in general, whether that be via process, whether that be via automation, but ultimately whether we are giving the right roles to the right people and building companies from that.
So a team that's understanding who is the makeup, where they're best positioned, and are we collectively understanding how can we move from today for the future, for the betterment of business, that, but thinking of different ways, not just going, Paul, we've got a job, let's go to LinkedIn. Matt, you've done a bit of sales recruitment in the past, you can do that. But really being strategic and working out who's the right person, what tools are right for that person, and kind of, I guess, taking a step back before going forward. Is that right?
I think the word of today is probably going to be why. And I think ultimately having an alignment on why is really the best strategy to get forward in any high performance metric, whether you're in recruitment, whether you're in building, whatever you do, understanding the why, strategizing around that is definitely what high performance is to me.
Okay. And I guess the topic of today kind of also segues into performance and ultimately in recruitment burnout, shall we say. And I titled this Reclaim Your Energy, because I feel like at certain times people will flirt with burnout, either knowingly or unknowingly. They'll go in and out of that state. What for you does burnout look like when we talk in the sense of recruitment?
Yeah, good question. I think burnout, for me personally, is when you are running at the lowest possible level of emotional, physical, mental capacity, to be honest.
Okay, and why do you feel it's, I guess, particularly, or why do you feel we're particularly vulnerable to this kind of state in the role of a recruiter or a talent advisor, talent acquisition, whatever our job title is in this field? Why are we particularly vulnerable to it?
Yeah, I think we have so many moving goalposts as recruiters, right? We have non-stop KPIs. We always need to bring someone in yesterday as a business. There's never enough hires to. There's never enough people to find. I think ultimately we can kind of over-engineer our work, and we become part of that cycle. And I think the idea that we view our work as cycle sometimes really detracts from the end goal. And I think sometimes when you don't have that clear end goal, that's really one of the biggest leaders to burnout. To be fair.
There's this constant flywheel effect. If I do this, I'm going to get that, and then if I do this, but you never have the why am I ultimately getting it at the end? It's that next short sprint. I mean, you're nodding your head on this. If anyone's not watching on a video, you're nodding his head on it. I'm going to full track to this. I work in sprints in my own head. where I'll have a specific role in mind. Once I fill that role, I'll take a few days off. And then the problem I fall the trap of is that role gets hired and then something else comes on. And then those few days never really get taken off. I'm really bad for that. I'll hold my hand up. I suck at that. But you've known me long enough. I think I've always been like that. Even when you and I worked together, it was quite similar. So what would you say are some of the contributing factors of recruiter burnout?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I think having that lack of clarity is probably one of the biggest. If you don't have a North Star in a lot of the things you do,
Mm.
it's really hard to really understand what the end of the tunnel looks like. So having things like unclear targets, shifting goals constantly, and conflicting KPIs from different departments you might be working with, not having a clear company vision, and companies are having to reinvent themselves constantly now. And obviously, recruiters feel like they're filling seats, but sometimes they might not feel like they're building something meaningful at a company, and also just having no clarity in your career path. Where do you go from here? As I say, you can be really stuck in a rut when you don't have that strategic ability and you feel you're just operational.
I guess that also comes down to the business itself, where you've got some control over what you're capable of doing. There's going to be a lot of things, especially in that role of a recruiter, where you have no control. You don't really have the control of the vision of the company. And especially in the last few years where things have chopped and changed and, what you joined the company for might have been X and then now it's completely different. So there are going to be parts where you can't do that, which then I guess kind of gets back down to this constant pressure part, which is, I guess, ultimately what you was mentioning a moment ago, where how do you kind of keep performing at this level where you don't really know where you're going?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's really important for yourself personally is just trying to set that for yourself. And obviously, sometimes when you don't have the support, I mean, some recruiters will be working for Series A companies where talent maybe isn't so built out as a metric yet. And every day's a scrappy day where sometimes you can't really contribute some of the day in, day out work to really that long term, what you're building, understanding kind of while you can kind of very much track your output, it's sometimes really hard as well to see what the output is on you emotionally and mentally as well. I think personally, as I said, goal posts can change so much at a business, and no one recruiting role is ever the same. If you're working for a kind of a smaller startup that's bootstrapped, maybe you're really in the weeds of it day in day out, or you're being quite scrappy, and a lot of the time you don't really see the contribution of that day in day out work over kind of the larger spectrum of things if you don't have maybe fully fledged out as a sort of North Star to work towards. So
Mm.
that clarity sometimes really builds into kind of where can I go from here.
Yeah. I think you mentioned at the beginning when I asked you, what does it mean for recruiters that they're afraid of burnout? And you said emotional, physical, and mental. When you talk about emotional, kind of the emotional toll on you, explain to me a little bit more about how that's specific, I guess, to us as recruiters. Because I think that's the one where I've definitely been in the role of burnout, shall we say, and I would look back and go, yeah, I recognize it now. That was happening emotionally. Whereas at the time, you're like, brush it under the carpet, move on, because that's, what I would do. I'm not saying it's the right thing to do. That's definitely not. But explain to me a little bit more, explain to us a little bit more what you meant by emotional labor.
Yeah, as I say, you put so much of your heart and soul into recruiting because you are your own self driver. No pipeline is going to be magically full as soon as you step into it, right? So you have to generate a lot of your emotions within selling a role. Sometimes you have to sell your
Mm.
authenticity to people. That can be quite transactional, and I think sometimes when you're speaking to people, you're not going to know whether that's the right person. You kind of have a feeling sometimes that you have to sell yourself just to get to a point where, yeah, you can kind of really build that pipeline and build someone into it long term into that role. So you kind of have to accept a lot of the time that you're probably going to give away a lot more energy than maybe some other roles that are perhaps more binary in that sense of success. And with that spend, it's output, 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 and it's
Yeah.
really hard to have input sometimes as an end result of that.
I think that's also that's the part I probably feel the most, especially when you put so much heart and energy into a particular process, and you think, great, we've got the person, I can turn that mentally off in my head and focus now onto this thing, and then obviously you do that with loads of different roles juggling all around, and then for whatever reason something happens, hiring manager says no, offer comes out and it's below what you know the person's going to be happy with, counter offers come up, whatever. And it's that crush. I mean, I'm going to use the phrase crushing it. It's that crushing moment where you're like, oh, I've got to do this again. I mean, I'm going to put myself in the category of resilience on the element. It will take me a couple of hours, but I will bounce back up. If it happens in the morning, by the afternoon, I'm back on that search. I know where I'm going with it, but that's obviously not for everyone. I know it is, and I've seen it firsthand. It can be soul destroying. It can ruin people's weekends, especially. I know you're very hot on that boundary setting part. Do you feel that contributes to the element of burnout for recruiters, where we kind of are always switched on?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think emotionally you have to be so attached, but when you look at the bigger picture of things, you also have to manage being detached at the same time. And that sounds like a negative to a certain extent, right? But I think you certainly have to be stoic in terms of how you approach your day in, day out work, because you know that success isn't granted in something like recruitment. So you really have to manage how you give your emotion at the same time. But I would also say you have to manage how you protect your emotions as well, in the sense that it's sort of that never too high, never too low approach to recruiting is
Yeah,
the only one that's going to really see you through it. And how you employ that, you have to obviously learn from that. You have to give yourself to really understand how much you've given, and you have to not take it on the chin as a mistake, but you have to really analyze, okay, why am I putting so much into it that's led to me be so burnt out? And that comes from a good place, but it's also reflecting in a kind way to yourself as well. So it is something to manage. And yeah, it's not the greatest thing to say you have to be detached in recruitment, but you certainly have to know how to be stoic at the best of times when you're managing stakeholders, candidates, you're managing people, and it's not an easy job by any stretch of the imagination.
how do you deal with that element of that blurred line between work and rest? So especially, I know you had a former remote role, two remote roles, and actually no, even right now you're still remote, right?
I
Mostly
am,
remote.
yeah, certainly am,
And
yeah.
I mean that is, I see it with Paige, my wife. Obviously, for those who haven't met her, Matt has. I mean, I don't know why I just said my wife to you. You know her. But that I see it with her. It's like there is this element where she's on online at 7, which don't get me wrong, I've done it, but I don't know. I don't know. I feel like having been online at 7 in an office versus being online at 7 in our lounge, there's just like this. It just feels weird.
Yeah, I mean, there's two parts to this, in my opinion. There's what you can do during the work week, and there's what you can do out of the work week, right? And I think, as I said earlier, recruiting is so output heavy in terms of your day, right? And it's especially when you're working a remote role, your home becomes your office, and that's not always the healthiest way to treat your home, right? And
Yeah.
there are certain things that you can do that I found a lot of solace in. So setting hard boundaries in terms of I'm going to log off at this time, or I'm going to start a little bit later in the day if you're having to work across different time zones. That's one, first of all, that's helped me reclaim a little bit more sense of who I am, because it's easy to really lose sense of who you are during the week. Sometimes you just think, okay, this whole week I'm giving to being a recruiter, and I personally, someone that is a massive, massive believer of getting yourself outside as much as possible, especially when you're spending more time inside in your remote roles, right? So when you wake up in the morning, you have a burst of cortisol, and cortisol, not to get too technical here, but cortisol is something that gives you stress, right? But ultimately, it's a healthy thing that wakes you up in the morning. If you're not getting the energy out of you in the morning, that stress is just going to pile into the work, which is going to have a knock-on effect. So a big proponent of going for even a 15-minute walk in the morning, try and see something green, whether that's a few trees, whether you're lucky enough to live outdoors in near the woods. Going for a walk and really start the day as calm as possible. Really adhering to your breaks as well. That's a massive thing, which we've all been guilty of not taking at the best of times. If you're using Slack on your phone, make sure to have do not disturb time always on as well. But in terms of the other side of that, the weekend, I think a big thing that's helped me is the 3 R's. So rest, renewal, and recharging. Rest is what it says on the tin, right? So rest in the context that I'm talking about is just resting your brain and having some stillness in your brain. That can take shape in a lot of different forms, whether that's just laying in an extra hour during the weekend, whether that's going on digital detox. I'm a big fan of having some form of stillness in your brain, doing things like meditation, just trying to practice constantly. And I'm not great at it. I'm not going to tell you that otherwise, but whether that's meditation, whether that's prayer, just trying to encourage some stillness in your head sometimes where you're constantly not putting more and more into it. And
Hmm.
then renewal, I think it takes two different shapes, renewal. When I'm talking about renewal, I'm talking about ultimately reconnecting with people. So whether you're an introvert, whether you're an extrovert, two different ways of renewal. I often say extroverts kind of wake up in the day with an empty bag of coins. The more people they engage with, the more people they talk to over a day, the more coins they kind of get. Introverts obviously are the opposite of that. So they kind of wake up with that bag of coins and they spend it on those interactions with people. I find though having some kind of form of connection is really helpful for kind of getting your mind back into the sweet spot, let's call it, right?
Yeah.
So whether that's as an extrovert, meeting people over the weekends and maybe going for a coffee with a group of friends, making sure that that energy you're getting is really healthy energy from people that you love and trust. Whether you're an introvert, maybe, I don't know, doing something creative, maybe painting, maybe doing something that can give you that energy back, or just talking to a loved one on the phone. Those are really great ways that I think people can kind of get that social kind of battery back to a place where it needs to be, where it's not so transactional. And I think
Mm.
sometimes, yeah, in recruitment, it can be very transactional, and we can always take that outside the office sometimes, unfortunately. So those are kind
Yeah.
of two ways I would say there. Yeah. And then finally, a big part of kind of getting out of that burnout is doing things that engage your brain as well, learning new things and feeling that satisfaction from learning things is a big way that you can kind of recharge your brain and using different parts of it. So, yeah, painting, going out for walks in the weekend for more of an extended walk, or doing things that get you away from a screen. I'm someone that I will admit I still like to do some kind of Xbox during the weekend, right, where I can kind of turn my brain off. These are great ways of recharging yourself, and I'd really recommend any recruiter to kind of just try and set maybe one or two, three attempts at that. It's not going to be something overnight because you can't give 100% of a change and expect it to really take place, but just start implementing some things that are healthy for your brain. I think really go into the next week in a really great way.
One of the things, and by the way, that those 3 hours, I absolutely love that because I've fallen guilty of not doing certain elements of that. Um, and when life starts to pile on top of work, that's when things just go complete chaos. And I'm a firm believer you could probably like we can load things onto our shoulders for a couple of weeks and then you start to get back to normal after and it's fine. But obviously it's a prolonged period. That's when burnout creeps in. And I've seen it, my kind of catalyst or tell is when I stopped doing things on the weekend that I enjoyed to do. Like organically, I would read. When I would stop doing that because I'm too tired, okay, then I have to start peeling back and work, okay, why am I too tired? Okay, well, the little one's up at night and I'm working still, 11, 12-hour days and I'm not taking a break. Okay, well, there's a root problem I can fix. I can't stop the little one getting up at night as much as I would love to. Still got to train that one. I can either shorten my day or I can take that break. So then you kind of get back into the motion of, okay, if I start doing this, let me try that. Does it fix? Does it help? Do I get back into it? Do I get more energy? So I think there's these little tells as, again, I'm not saying at that point I was in a burnout mode, but these little tells that you can kind of see along the path. Are you going towards that route? And I think a lot of the things you've shared there, I imagine that our listeners have probably experienced either fully or to some degree or know someone. I think, especially in the talent acquisition space and the last few years, we've been absolutely pummeled. Right? It was like worth our weight in gold. We were like more valuable than software engineers 5 years ago. And then 3 years ago, no one wants to touch you with a barge pole. And now things are just starting to move again in the talent space. But still, there's some incredible talent they just can't find roles and things like that. And we're just being pushed, pulled left, right. So I can see it. You use the word healthy, as you was explaining throughout what you were just sharing there. You use the word healthy, and you and I were talking about kind of working relationships and trying to find a way to maintain a healthy relationship with your work, where you feel comfortable, you can set that boundary, you know where you're going, and you mentioned at the beginning as well the why you're getting there. So I guess from my side and for the listeners, what strategies can we actually deploy, I guess, to maintain that healthy relationship with our work? Because then we know if we're losing track of that, we either need to change something, either drastically in the sense of change your job, or we need to take more subtle changes where we can get back to that I guess that purpose, that why. So what could you do?
So yeah, I think a great point on that kind of topic is some of the work of Simon Sinek. So Simon Sinek being a very famous author, known mostly for always start with why. I just said earlier at the beginning, why is kind of that all-encompassing word, I think, that really gives weight, gives value, and gives so much energy to any situation we might be, and how to come out from that in a positive manner. So Simon Sinek is a big proponent within the book of the Golden Circle. And the Golden Circle basically is a framework where you can build out the why. So your purpose, the cause, your belief, why ultimately you do what you do.
Mhm.
The how, which is kind of the process, the methodology, the values that are going to guide you to that end point of success. And the what, the outcome, the metrics they might be, the tasks, or I don't know, that promotion, for example. So I find when burnout really strikes out most, it's a lot of recruiters are stuck at that what level. So I'm a recruiter, I'm filling roles, I'm hitting 10 calls a day, I'm doing 2 hours of inbound calls a day, maybe as an agent recruiter, right? But
Mhm.
you've really lost that connection to the why. So why am I doing this? I'm helping people change their lives, right? I'm giving this person that's a student the opportunity to build a career here, not just a position for the next 2 3 years. Or maybe I'm matching someone with real purpose to this opportunity. I'm changing my company for the better. That adds just another layer to what you're doing, but I think that adds so much credence to that as well.
So why why does having the why help you in the sense of burnout?
Yeah, because I think ultimately burnout is, while it is, yeah, emotional, physical, and mental exhaustion, often the leading cause of burnout is just not having that why behind what you're doing. I think if you just feel like you are, as I say, in that circle, a circle is not going to end. And as I say, we
Mm.
work in pipelines here, we work in a cycle all the time. And if you don't give yourself an end goal, if you don't give yourself that point to reach to, you're just going to be stuck in that constant cycle and you're not going to get anywhere. It's just going to burn you out even further.
I think as well, by having that element of why, and say I'm doing it, I'm helping people, I want to change people's lives. I think it also takes you slightly out of I'm just a recruiter. And I think if anyone in talent acquisition or recruitment sits and goes, I'm just a recruiter, you're not. You do way, way more than just recruit people. Like, in my opinion, I think we do. But it gives you that opportunity to think bigger, to get excited around it. And then when that job comes on or that dropout happens or you have to rework something, yeah, it sucks. It's painful. Don't get us wrong. But I think then that's the motivation going, okay, I'm going to, fair enough, that person didn't want it. Matt didn't want that job. I'm going to go find someone who does want that job. That should then help you motivate. I'm going to go change someone else's life for that role. That's where I think, and I would see that's where the energy stems from, because you have that understanding of it's not great. It's emotionally hurt me, mentally hurt me, but the why remains the same. Let's go get it.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think, look, it's easier said than done, right? I think
Absolutely.
sometimes it's hard to take a
Absolutely.
step back and really evaluate these things, but you're totally right.
How do you think we can apply the context of why from Mr. Sinek to the process of recovery? Because again, that was my one example, but that was a super off the beat example, as it were. I think a lot of people might have heard of the concept, but then bringing it out of finding your purpose, but then actually putting it into the context of finding that purpose to help you recover. How could we do
Yeah.
that?
So, I mean, I think that there's different ways to apply this. I think if you're going to look at it from your personal perspective, like reflect on your personal why, first of all. Why did I become a recruiter in the first place? Yeah, we all like to joke and say, oh, we just fell into recruitment, but what's even kept us there in the first place, right? What gives me that energy? What gives me that kind of sense of feeling when we did our first deal and remember that feeling? We can't always
You
put
remember your
words to it,
first
but
deal?
I do. We did it together, I believe.
We definitely did. But do you remember who it was? Do you remember where it was? That's the big question.
I definitely do. Constantine Manor. I can't remember the name of the company, but God, yeah, I do remember it. And
And that is the feeling that you need to keep forever. That's the way I look at it. Murat, I can't remember his surname. I apologize, Murat. But Murat was a SCADA engineer, Turkish SCADA engineer, and I placed him at Wipro. And that was nearly 13 years ago now. And I still remember him because he was my very first hire.
and you're still chasing that feeling. It's that emotional
You do,
feeling that
you do. It
the
never gets
buzz.
better.
It never gets worse. We'll say that much, right?
Uh, yeah, dry
But
spells.
yeah, I feel like as well, like just in terms of like kind of that company wide, perhaps if you're just applying it in kind of your work life actively. So what is kind of like the what are you doing on a day basis? Let's say you've got, I don't know, I need to fill two roles this month. Rather than just
Mhm.
seeing it as so black and white as that, let's reframe it in that I'm giving two people an opportunity to really join something amazing here and really go back to when you're maybe qualifying these roles with your hiring managers. Maybe not so much what's the impact of this role, but what is the long term impact of this role, right? What's the long
Mm,
term strategy that we're building towards? What are we building out as a business? How's this going to really impact the company, impact the market for the future? And I think just adding that extra layer to it just really gives you more of that strategic feel again. And really kind of the way that you frame it, I think makes such a difference. It's not just
yeah.
semantic.
One, just to chime in on that, and you're saying, if your why in recruitment is to change lives, and again, I haven't tried this, so someone, if please try it. So when you are qualifying for your hiring manager, why not bring in the element of how will this role change someone's life if they were to join your team? You don't know necessarily what their situation is, but what's the impact for the company? Great. So long-term impact for the company, great. But what's going to impact? How's it going to impact Matt? If Matt joins, how's it really going to make a difference in his life? And then you've got your why as your own personal. I want to change people's lives, and you're armed with the answer of how this role can help someone do that. And then it's down to you to get that person absolutely buzzing in that first call. Again, haven't
Absolutely.
tried it. Off the thought, could be a good one. Could be terrible. Please, someone let me know.
I'll let you know how it goes. Yeah, 100%.
Okay, so we understand. We're trying to understand the impact. You're trying to see bigger than picture. What else can we do? What would you say would be the next step to kind of implementing that why component into our jobs?
Yeah, I mean, taking a step back from that, I think let's say you've applied those steps, right? You've really kind of taken a step back and you've had a look why that why is important to you, and you've kind of reframed it and you've kind of tracked what the small shifts are. I'd be really interested to see how your month looks different after you try doing that, whether that is something that is qualitative, whether that is something that's quantitative. I'm a big
Mhm,
fan personally of journaling, and
mhm,
sometimes it can seem like extra work to do. But I think really it's a great source of analysis in terms of what was the tangible difference that would be made from this month to last month, where I've maybe added a bit of seasoning to what I'm doing. And I would be really interested to see any negative result from that. And I think that's something that I would really employ. So journaling, really looking at yourself differently, really analysing kind of what changes that's made and just working with it in a really agile way is something I would say.
That then change. I mean, again, I assume you're journaling. Is it daily? Is it weekly?
I journal weekly at the moment, so I'll
Okay.
do kind of every Wednesday personally. I do kind of I look at my performance over the last week from Wednesday to Wednesday, and the reason why I do Wednesday is generally speaking, if something goes wrong, that's the best time to change, right? If you do it kind of Friday to Friday, you're probably going to forget over the weekend, and
Yeah.
like Monday, it can be a slog to get your energy back into gear that you were kind of operating at on that Friday sometimes. So Wednesday is kind of when you're really in the deep of things, and I think that's when you can be the most impactful. So Wednesday journaling is something that's helped me so much, and that also gives me the avenue to really explore that why again, and that gives me the
Hmm.
right framework to really apply it in the best way possible.
Well, I was going to say, so you journal on the Wednesdays, you're reflecting on the past week, the good, the bad, the ugly, whatever, and then you're utilizing that as, I guess, a catalyst to change something, or do you just reflect it? You're not changing, because again, if you're changing every week, are you giving it time to settle in before you make another change? And because again, that got very quickly to become, I guess, chaos. And are you changing the right thing? Do you know what I mean? Because again, you want to realign this to your why, you want to realign this to your work, but again, is it too much too quickly? That sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think that's probably a question that you would give yourself when you are so output focused. That we work in tech, right? Tech always changes, and I think that's ingrained to us to a certain extent, but it doesn't have to be changed, right? Let's say we're looking back on the week and it's going great. You don't really need to change anything then, and maybe you can use that chance to reflect and really reward yourself. Maybe set yourself some small rewards over the week, or just really appreciate where you are currently. And I think that's something we don't do enough as recruiters. We don't really reframe ourselves and look, this is actually going really well. I don't need to change anything at this moment in time. If things aren't going well, sure, let's take that chance and look on that change. But I would disagree in that, yeah, we have to constantly look at changing every week and shifting, because the more we shift, the less tangible change is probably going to happen, right? So
Yeah.
I would actually reframe that and say, you look at a chance to see what's going right and really be appreciative of what is going right.
So how do we get to a point where we feel emotionally secure?
In terms of how to build it, I think obviously, first of all, you need to learn how to be kind to yourself, and that's not something you can do overnight. You can't just flick a switch, say, I'm going to be kind to myself now. But what you can start doing is to start saturating yourself with a bit more positivity in terms of why you might be questioning, and how you can kind of, yeah, feel appreciative of what you've already done before. So I don't know if this sounds cheesy, but I keep a positivity document, and GDPR compliant, of course.
Always.
But yeah, I keep a file of great interactions that I've had with people, whether that's just recommendations on LinkedIn, whether that's been personal kind of thank yous from people, just journaling as well, just the good impact that you've made on people, and remembering that you are helping people. It doesn't
Mm.
matter what side of the spectrum of recruitment you are. It's a job that is helping people get jobs and get into work. And you can't sell yourself short because of that. You can't be stuck in just this constant loop and cycle. So practicing how to be kind to yourself, I think, starts with building in those checks over the week. So adhering, first of all, to having heartbreaks is just a way that you can practice some kindness to yourself, and starting to build those boundaries and normalizing those boundaries, I think, is really important. But just really trying, as well as this, not to be so caught up in the fact that I am Eden, I am the recruiter, this is me. Really try to reclaim your identity outside of work, as much as it's important to have that identity and that employer branding and what makes you different, unique, and you as a recruiter. There's also that you outside that might be someone that is a father, a carer, a brother, a sister, and that's what you're going to be once you've retired. And you're gonna it's going to take a long time to come to terms with that when we do get to that end point, is who we are.
Mm.
So trying to be aware of who you are today, trying to really build back your identity of who you are in the weekend, and really try to be kind to yourself over the weekend, is the best way that I've personally found solace in really trying to have that healthy boundary, and really try to have that emotional security that I'm still Matt outside of work.
I appreciate that. And look, from my side, I really appreciate you being honest and transparent about all of the topic of burnout. Because I think so it's a big topic. It's one that I know a lot of people are feeling and have felt, especially these last few years, not just in TA, right? I talk about TA because that's the listeners and that's what we both do. But even those who listen, who find this, who don't fall into that category, we're all going to experience it at some point, no doubt. So I appreciate your genuine honesty here. If someone wanted to connect with you, wanted to have an open chat further with you, where is the best place that they can get hold of you?
Yeah, so Matthew Noble on LinkedIn. Would love to reach out to anyone who wants to have a chat.
Perfect. And from my side, thank you. Although it's taken 2 years of getting you on here, hopefully a few people find solace in the words you've said and kind of reach out to you back of that. But thank you so much.
Thanks so much. See you in another 2 years.
No, it won't be that long. Congratulations.